here today with Dr. Joanna Thompson. Hi, Joanna.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. So excited to be a part of the show. So, as mentioned, I'm Dr. Joanna Thompson. My pronouns are she, they, and I currently serve as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for an interior solutions company called One Workplace that's based in the Bay Area in California, in Santa Clara, California, South Bay. And our office is primarily located in Santa Clara, but we do have other locations throughout the Bay Area in San Francisco, Oakland, Monterey Bay, and even up in Washington State and Seattle and Spokane. And for me, my role, I'm a part of our HR team that helps support all of those office locations and all of our employees, including remote employees too, outside of the West Coast, and really focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion for our internal goals as far as making sure our workforce is diverse, and that we are, creating an environment that is inclusive and equitable for our employees, but then also externally as we're working with our customers and our clients, making sure that any needs that they have around diversity, equity, inclusion, we are meeting. And then in addition to the DEI stuff, I also do sustainability work. So making sure that, our products are sustainable, our practices are sustainable, especially when we think about furniture and design. So much of it can, for example, go to waste or landfill. And so making sure that we are doing our best, not just for our people, but also for our planet. So lots to do,
I,
but
I
keeps
love
me
it.
busy.
And how does it feel to work for a company that seems to be doing good work, like doing the right for the right reasons, right?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, as much as I'm a team of one in terms of the director of all of this work, I'm grateful that, our HR team have an amazing group of people who are allies and advocates for this work. And then so many of our designers, our sales team, just other teams across the organization who truly believe in the power of diversity, the power of sustainability, and are, also doing the work, even though it may not be in their title or things that they're, essentially getting paid to do, but they believe that it's right and that it's just. And so I'm grateful to be a part of an organization that has, that perspective.
That is great. And man, allies, they really, really do help make the environment. And without
Yeah.
them, it would be hard to make some of the changes. With this focus on DEI, like what have you noticed that has changed? Like, what are the needs of employees today?
Yeah.
You were
Oh my
saying?
gosh. So much change. I would say for context, before coming into the corporate world, I was working in higher education. And so working for over 12 to 13, 14 years with college students. And obviously a college campus is much different than a corporation or a business.
Right.
But the needs of diversity are still the same, right? You have different types of people, different types of communities coming together and really trying to do good work and attain similar goals, but at the tension of those differences, and really trying to understand each other. And so in the role that I do now, and as I've seen kind of the shift from some of the work that I used to do in higher ed and now in this more corporate world, I think one of the biggest shifts that I've seen is the virtual component. Obviously, during the pandemic, being introduced or reintroduced to things like Zoom and being online all day, it really changed how we interact with each other, our interpersonal skills, our communication skills, and really kind of having to learn a lot of that all over again, especially when we came back into the office, or are still navigating like this hybrid world, right? And so that has really kind of challenged the diversity aspect because people learn differently,
Yeah.
people have different ways that they communicate. And so being able to, it's hard when there's not a one size fits all. So being able to kind of assess and reassess what that communication looks like at the intersection of diversity, it's such an ongoing conversation.
What a very refreshing perspective. And it reminds me of I don't know if it's an adage or something, but basically just inherent, like diversity exists, right? We're all
Yeah.
different on visible and non-visible ways. And then to think that we could slap one solution and have it work for everybody, is just like, oh, that's like who thought of this? So
Yeah.
in your approach, it sounds like you're really listening a lot and adapting to the needs of folks. And I also don't hear a lot of people talking about what changed in us in our
Yeah.
relationship skills around COVID, and emphasizing it seems like at the essence of what you're talking about is a lot of how do we connect with each other and work together,
Yeah.
and that's changed. What are the challenges now? Like I know you mentioned virtual, but what are the some of the other challenges or uh, yeah, obstacles
Yeah.
connecting with each other on our teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other, kind of shifts that has become a challenge is the sense of belonging and how to craft that. I actually was just having a conversation with some of my former colleagues just last week about, especially as DEI and the words start to become a little, taboo these days, the shift is more towards the inclusion part, the belonging part, but really breaking down what that means, right? That you feel that you're a part of a space, you feel those connections, you feel that sense of community. And I think that has become a big challenge because there's a lot of layers to that, right? Based upon your identity, based upon your, where you are in the world, accessibility to certain things. I know for us at our organization, because we have so many folks that are hybrid or completely remote, creating that sense of belonging is difficult, right? Where for folks who are just online all day on Zoom because they work from a different state or a different city, how do we make sure that they feel that same sense of community compared to those of us who are going into the office a couple days a week and actually seeing each other in person? And so I think that has probably been one of the biggest challenges that I've seen firsthand, but then also heard from other colleagues who do this work of, how do you craft that sense of belonging when we all are so different and the times have changed, right?
Right. It's hard, even if you're going into the office to do that. When you add
Yeah.
that not physical presence or that remote, ability. And then what I also hear from a lot of managers and teams is like, we don't have time for this type of skill or this type of work. You mentioned that people forgot or having to relearn these skills. Have you had any
Yeah.
success in mounting that obstacle of that perception that this work isn't needed right now, or there's not enough
Yeah.
time to address this work?
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful that again, our HR team at One Workplace, we really have a good like handle on making the time and making the
Okay.
space. One of the things that we do, and some of our other teams do throughout the organization, is hold summits, as we call them. So kind of like a retreat. And it's an opportunity to get an entire team together, even if it's just once a year or maybe once a quarter. But being able to kind of break those virtual boundaries and see each other in person, communicate about not just the work things, but also just getting to know each other, having a team dinner, getting together to volunteer outside of the office, being able to create that community with and for each other. So that way, in those moments when we're not together, we've been able to establish some bonds, right? And it really shows, I think, in the success of our team and the work that we do that we're able to look out for each other and, really kind of just be there for one another because we've taken the time to establish that, get to know each other, compared to maybe some other teams where, again, it might be a little bit more difficult, depending upon their role or kind of their day to
Right.
day. But really advocating for, there's a positive in that, right? Like you're going to show up for people that that you have a little bit more of that sense of connection versus, if you don't really know them, not that you're not going to show up for them, but it makes it a little bit more challenging when there's
Yeah.
not that interpersonal connection.
Right, right. And I find that like talking about feelings at work is really difficult for some people, right?
Yeah.
And this connection, if you're getting close to somebody, you're probably going to have to understand or deal with feelings at some point. Do you run into people like having a hard time with other people's emotions or their own and understanding
Yeah.
that?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about feelings. I mean, throughout my entire career, I've had either one-on-one conversations or group conversations where somebody has cried, somebody has, laughed too hard, somebody has maybe been a little bit too vulnerable. But I personally think that there's power in that, you're showcasing your true humanity and who you are. And that sense of vulnerability, I think, makes really great leaders. Makes great managers and
Absolutely.
supervisors. And I'm grateful that I also lead from that perspective of that, obviously sometimes there's a time and a place, but if the feelings are going to be felt, that, it helps to bridge that community connection and create those sense of belonging. And I'm also grateful that I think one of the key places that a lot of that happens for us at our organization is our employee resource groups, that, those
Ah,
groups are rooted in identity, shared experiences, and there's a lot of feeling that comes with that of being, Black in the workplace, Latinx in the workplace, LGBTQ plus in the workplace, so on and so on. And so a lot of those groups have really crafted their own safe and brave space to
mhm.
be able to talk about the feels and lead into it. So yeah.
Absolutely. I know that a lot of my growth started from being part of and then leading you know, an ERG, being the only gay person in the office, having the cupcakes, trying to move the needle in some direction, towards equity. So we've talked about that kind of community building, right? And I think to folks like you and I that are kind of in this, tell me, what do we gain when we build that community at work? And I'm also then going to ask, like, what do we lose when we don't have it?
Yeah, no, I think from the gain perspective, one of the things that I've learned kind of shifting from higher ed to corporate is really understanding how it impacts the business, right? In terms of, you still have to be profitable, there's still money that needs to be made. And a lot of our successful, probably our most successful projects that we've had have been rooted in some sort of diversity request, sustainability request,
Okay.
and showcasing our clients that we care not only about the spaces that we create, because essentially that's the business that we're in, but the
Right.
people that are in those spaces. That if you think about, going to work every day, and I can't remember what the number is, but people we work with, like those are the folks we spend most of our time with, whether it is virtual or in person, really making sure that, again, those connections are not necessarily like you have to be best friends, but in a way that they are respectful and inclusive and equitable, and seeing the success of our projects when we really focus on that from the beginning is great. And I mean, for some of our projects that are more like public facing, I think one of the ones that I love the most is our team up in Seattle worked with the Seattle Storm WNBA team, and that entire project was rooted in, diversity and making sure that we're focusing on women and LGBTQ plus communities and giving back to our local communities. And for those who have never seen it, like just Google it. There's like YouTube videos and links to their practice facility, and it's amazing. And so seeing kind of the power of what that can do, I think is the gain. I think the loss when we don't have the diversity, and not just diversity in terms of identity, but diversity of thought, diversity of experience, you lose out. I think, a lot of the conversations that I've had internally and even externally in the last year or so is that if we're not keeping up with the changes, if we're not keeping up with the transformation that's happening around diversity, and again on sustainability, we're losing out in terms of the opportunity that we could have to be a part of big projects, to be more successful. Because there's so much research that shows, when you have diverse teams, when you are leaning into diversity, you're going to be able to be in a much more positive, light, right? And so,
Right.
at times I think it's a little scary because for a lot of folks, it is a very maybe political, social, cultural, hot potato these days. But,
Yeah.
think about when we're not crafting, communities that are, that feel that sense of belonging. If we're not being accessible, if we're not even just thinking about it, you lose out on just so much for the people and for the work that's being done.
Yeah, you're not going to challenge the status quo if you don't feel like you're comfortable. You're not
Yeah,
going to have that headspace to innovate or
right.
really, get to the root of any challenge.
Yeah,
Love it. So what do you think though is the like kind of personal like responsibility of the individual, even if like you are like the only person like you on whatever dimension? What's
yeah.
the like personal responsibility versus like the workplace responsibility for creating belonging, a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I think on the personal side, two things come to mind. One, just doing the individual work when it comes to diversity. And what I mean by
I mean,
that
yeah,
is
I was gonna say,
is
tell me what you mean by that.
is really just understanding yourself, right? A lot of conversations and even like trainings and things that I've done in the past, I always start with the self because a lot of us, when we think about our own identities, whether it's our race, our class, our gender, our, sexual orientation, we haven't really done the work to understand what does that mean? Are we comfortable in our own skin? Do we feel
Right.
that we could be out and proud about who we are? Can we talk about these things? Do we have folks to talk about it with? And a lot of times, you can't expect others to show up for other people if you're not showing up for yourself. And so I really tell folks like, get to know you first, like really understand why you think how you think. Maybe you have some biases, we all do, understand where they come from. Maybe how do you reroute some of those biases that may be more hurtful. And then that way you can really engage in the work in a more authentic way. Um, and then the other piece that I think is more personal is really, again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, allies and advocates,
Yeah.
people who can be in your corner, whether it's just somebody you can vent to when days are tough, or somebody that can maybe have, that has a little bit more power and privilege than you to be able to speak up and speak out on your behalf and with you and for you.
Right.
Because it's hard to do this work alone. I mean, it really does take a village and take other people to be able to be in it with you. And so I would say those are kind of the two more personal things that I would say. From a workplace perspective, I think it really starts with leadership. It really is a matter of modeling the way and having leaders, not just at the very top, but throughout the organization. Because I believe leaders are everywhere, right? It's not just the C-suite or directors or
Well,
folks. Like it's,
is it, have you noticed that it's like the C-suite,
yeah.
they're usually relationship oriented, they speak in line with the mission,
Yeah.
they live in it. And then you go to mid-level management across, and maybe they didn't buy into this, maybe they've never had to really reflect on
Yeah.
themselves or their worldview, their internal lens of the world before. How do you get people on board who maybe are like, okay, we have to do this now, and I
Yeah.
nobody's
Yeah.
reducing my KPIs here.
Oh, it's so difficult. And I mean, something that I've learned throughout my time at one workplace, I've been with the company for about 2.5 years now, and that mid-level level is probably the hardest nut to
Yeah.
crack. But if anything, the way that I approach it is really just having more intimate conversations. I
Okay.
think a lot of times when we do,
Like one-on-one, right?
yeah, like one-on-ones or even just with like leadership teams, so maybe groups of two or three, four or five. I think a lot of times when we do larger trainings and workshops, things get lost in the sauce. Folks can hide behind other people who may be more talkative or raise
Mhm.
their hand a little bit more. But as we mentioned before, it's not a one size fits all. Me talking with the leaders of our operations team and how they can really assess diversity is going to be completely different than me talking with the leaders of our sales team and how they can assess diversity. And
Yeah.
so taking the time to really understand each team, each leader, maybe having some difficult conversations and, maybe, pointing out some things that are sound a little rough in the beginning, but sharing it in a way that this is critical, right? And that if we're going to move forward, we have to see the highs and the lows. And honestly, for some of the teams that I've worked with, it's been really successful just to be able to kind of cater the conversation a little bit more to the person and to the teams instead of just kind of lumping it all together and being
Yeah.
more general.
Well, so what advice would you give to the person who finds himself on a team or in an environment where it doesn't seem like inclusion is the the directive for the day. It's a less
Yeah,
than inclusive
yeah.
environment. How do you advocate for yourself?
Yeah, I would say two things come to mind. The first being find the people who can
Advocate.
advocate,
Yeah.
right? For example, going back to our ERGs, a couple of folks who are a part of our ERGs, either as co-leads or just members, they unfortunately are a part of teams that may not be super, in line with things like ERGs or diversity, but they
Right.
have the ERG as an outlet, right, to be able to still use their voice and use their position to give back to that community or to give back to the broader diversity initiatives. And then the other thing I would say is that as best as you could have the difficult conversation either with your leader, your manager. One thing that I've noticed for our company is that particularly in that mid-level, folks want to engage in this work, but they just don't know how to start or what to say, what to do. It's still kind of a very, again, just scary topic because
Right, because
you
it's like
don't know.
there's no room to mess up. Like you
Right.
see in culture that, oh, this is important. I don't know what I'm doing, and if I mess up,
Yeah,
it's
it's gonna
like it could be very bad, for everybody.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
so, I mean, if the person feels that they, have the safety and the bravery and the energy to have that conversation,
mhm.
just a one-on-one and just say, hey, maybe this is something I'm interested in, or, just seeing, some other teams are kind of in line with diversity in a certain way and they're doing really great. Maybe we should take, a look at what they're doing and start there. And again, it doesn't have to be like a grand gesture, but opening up that conversation, I think a lot of people may be more surprised that, oh, there might be folks who are willing to be in the same boat, but they're just afraid to kind of take that first step.
Yeah, understandably, but wise words, wise words. So are you noticing that well-being and belonging and inclusion are starting to get a little bit closer? And are you doing anything in that realm?
Yes, yeah. So on our HR team, we have a director of health and safety.
Okay.
And for his role, it's primarily been mostly safety in terms of like, again, our operations teams. We have a
Physical
lot of
safety.
folks, yeah, like who are laborers in our company. But over maybe the last 2 to 3 years, there has been more of a shift to the mental health of our employees, physical health of our employees. We do have, obviously benefits that help support our employees from that perspective, but we have been doing a lot more work at the intersection of our ERGs with that particular individual to be able to support specific health and well-being issues or challenges, that maybe the Black community is facing or the Latinx community. We have a working parents group, and so, supporting the well-being of our folks who are parents or caretakers. And so there's been more conversation, more events, more programs. We've definitely done kind of like an audit of like the different benefits that we have to make sure that they truly are benefiting our employees. And mental health has definitely been one of them. We are big fans of Headspace, the app that you can use for sleep and meditation. And our employees have really taken to it to be able to just take the time when they need to take care of themselves and advocate for the days off and vacation and all the things to reset and recharge and then come back and be their best self at work.
I love it. So there's a lot of things that are impacting culture at work. Anything you could say to any advice you could give to future proof the workplace with
Yeah.
all of the changes that we have coming at us?
Yeah, I would say, one of the things that we at One Workplace are currently kind of our framework is radical transformation
Okay.
and leaning into the power of change, right? And I mean, change management for anybody or any organization is hard and it's difficult. But that's where the magic happens, right? And being open-minded to the evolution that will continue because, I mean, who knows, even in the last 30 minutes, something may have happened or changed
Right?
or the way that things are just rapidly, going. And so I would say just be open to that, right? That, I'm a firm believer of, the saying, well, we've always done things this way. It's not going to cut it. Like things are shifting and changing, and we have to be open to new ideas, new ways of thinking. And I think at the intersection of diversity, that helps uplift that, right? That when we have different types of people in the room, when we have different experiences, it opens up new doors and maybe things that we hadn't thought about in the past. And so really just being open-minded to change and not seeing it as some scary thing, but seeing it as, an opportunity for who knows what.
How easy to say, hard to do. I mean,
If I
change.
if I had the answer, I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah, change just can be like such a inciting event to all kind of like, wait, what is happening here? Are there any special programs that you haven't mentioned or things that you want to showcase about about where you work and what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this is actually our 100-year anniversary. And so, for folks who are listening in or watching, It's been an amazing opportunity to be a part of a company that has been around for that long, especially here in the Bay Area with roots in the San Francisco Bay Area. There's more information like on LinkedIn and on social
Okay.
media, but it's really exciting to be able to just be a part of that milestone for one workplace and celebrate hopefully another 100 years and all of the
And
change that will come.
I was going to say, I'm wondering how many radical transformations from 100 years ago, to now,
Yeah.
you've undergone. Well, they're in good hands with you at the helm of DEI and trying to
Thank
create
you.
this inclusive culture. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.